Hi everybody. So today we are going to demonstrate how to stretch our canvas now that we've got our beautiful stretchers built. This one needs crossbars, but these ones are ready to go. So come over here, take a look at the tools. This is what I'm going to be needing. Pair of scissors, staple gun. There are power staplers, but I don't know. You'll get strong hands if you try these. These are canvas clamps, which are really handy. It helps you kind of get a really nice tight stretch because canvas isn't always that easy to pull. This is just in case you need to remove a staple. The type of staples that you need, these are important. So look at those. See the spikes on the bottom? That's going to help it get into the wood and claw into the wood more strongly. So hammer just to make sure that they get pounded down, and again, this is in case you need to remove a staple. And so those are the basic tools that you need. Okay, to start, I've got my roll of canvas. So you can buy a big roll, you can buy them in blankets, however you want to do it. It's a little bit more cost effective if you can afford a large roll, because then you have a bunch over time. But yeah, you take your frames, set them out, and you want to have, I don't know, about, is that like 3 inches or so, just enough to wrap it around so that you can staple there. And then the cool thing about canvas is that, you know, it sticks in such a way that all I need to do is just make a little tiny snip with my scissors. And then I get to do this really fun thing where I just tear the fabric apart, which I love doing, by the way. But you don't want to cut it with scissors because it won't be straight. This will make it totally straight. Just go. And it tears so easily. Super fun. And then you've got your piece of canvas. So we'll start with one at a time. You don't want one side to be too much longer than another, so I might have to cut the other side a little bit here too. And I always keep my extra scraps of canvas because you never know when you want to do like a test piece or use it for something else. And then when I get to doing my staples, what I do is I always want to do the center points first. So if I'm doing a large piece like that one over there, it gets a little bit tiring, I admit. So sometimes I'll have a little pillow for my old knees. Since I'm getting old and you all are young, you can do this. But after a while, you'll be like, oh, my knees, my aching knees. So I'm gonna just put one in the center on all sides, or two maybe. I think I'll put two. And then I'll be able to use my clamp. So I don't need it obviously for the first one, but I've got those two in there. But when you do your clamps, you'll see there's like a nub on one side, and that's to help you like anchor it back. So you take these clamps, and that's to like claw it into the fabric. You clamp it on, and then you put the nub here, and you just pull it back like that. And then you can hold it with one hand and staple it with the other, like that. And you get a nice tight stretch. And then if the staple itself isn't going in fully, grab the hammer and just hammer it down a bit. And you know it's good and solid. So I'm gonna do the other two sides and basically work my way around the piece. It may seem like it's not that important for something like this, but with a larger piece in particular, something like an even stretch is going to be super important, because if you just do like one side and then go to the next side, your canvas might be totally crooked and maybe you run out of enough edge on one side because you've done it wrong. So it's best to just gradually stretch it as you go.
So going in an alternating pattern around the entire thing will help it be even?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because you want to keep those even borders around. So once I get the sort of centers done, then I kind of work my way slowly around on the sides. if I'm doing a really big piece, I'm gonna do this multiple times. Something like that, like I'll do this bit, and I'll go over there and do that bit, and that bit, and that bit, and I'll go around and around again until I get to the corners. And then it's the corners that are really the hardest.
So are you really like going for it when you crank the
I do, like I think I might, like when I do it at home, and I have a big piece like that, sometimes I do it too much.
Yeah, that's what I'm
when I
trying.
gesso it, you're gonna hear the wood crack. It'll like literally like bow up, and I'll have to weight it down.
But
Yeah.
it won't like hurt anything?
It didn't hurt anything, it sounded terrible.
Okay.
So a nice tight stretch is gonna make a really much better painting surface, so it's actually worth it. So, you know, I'm kind of doing the opposite side and then just going around and around. When I have something small like this, you know, I might not. But I'm trying to show you how it would work with a large piece as well. So with something small, I can just like do this instead of walking around it.
How far apart are you putting the staples?
About an inch. So notice that I'm stapling these diagonally, and if I did them straight, then you know how I tore the canvas really easily, it'd be more likely to tear that way. So putting it at an angle makes it more stable.
And do you make 100% of the canvases that you work
I do this with all my work. I don't like I don't like how skinny thin those are. Yeah, there's a difference between see how, so all of these are compared to like these pre-manufactured ones. Not to say anything bad about it, but even if I were gonna if I had to buy one, I still wouldn't buy one that skinny. I would get one of the gallery scale ones, but they're more expensive, right? So
Could
it's
you
more worth it
like,
to just buy it.
could you modify one that you buy?
No.
No?
I mean, it's not even just that. It's also the painting surface is very plastic, and it's not the same as being able to control your own surface. So I'll do one at home as well. Is like I tend to not like the canvas texture when I gesso it, so I do add ground to mine so that it makes it smooth. I suppose the manufactured ones are pretty smooth, but they're just like, it doesn't soak in the way that I like it to. So I don't know, the more that you make paintings and the more experienced you get, you can decide what surface you like. But surface is super important to the end quality of the work. So, you know, eventually you're gonna get closing in to the corners as you go. So I'm getting closer and closer, but you don't want to go any further in than maybe like right here before you start working on the corner, so you have some space to work with, because you're going to have to do these folds of the canvas. Let's pretend that I've done this far all the way around the edges. So we can speed this up a little bit. So the next question I have for you, are you going to have your painting horizontal or vertical?
So I'll do this one horizontal, and then I'll fold the other corners.
Okay, so the reason I asked that is because I don't like to frame my stretchers or my canvases, and so what I do is I just paint the sides really nice and clean, but I don't want the fold of the canvas to be visible to a viewer if they're looking at it from the side, hanging on the wall.
So you fold it so that it's on the
So
bottom?
I make the fold hidden underneath and above rather than on the side. So if your canvas is horizontal, you don't want the folds to be on the side, these sides. versus vertical, you don't want it to be on the sort
Okay.
of longer side.
I plan on doing one of each, so we'll just say horizontal for
Okay,
this one. and the other
so
one.
that makes a difference on how I handle these corners down here. So if this is horizontal this way, then I want this side to be flat, right? Because that's the side the viewer is going to see. So I'm going to finish off this side a little bit more than the other side. So the corners are what most people have problems with to make them look nice. And it is important because if you don't want to frame something, which is an extra expense, then you do want a nice looking corner, right? So I'm just getting this side good and flat. And when I stretch, by the way, I try to stretch instead of straight, I stretch to the side, out like from the center. This way a little bit and that way a little bit. Because if I do it straight, I might end up with these folds, kind of like that, what I don't want. So this side is straight here. And then down here, I might do maybe one more. But I need that extra space to have the fold sit. Okay, so close in on this. So this is the part that gets confusing. So this side is flat. So the important thing I want to do is like make that flat and then have the flap go to the side that I'm going to have the fold in. So then I'm going to focus on, there's two corners. There's one up here and there's one down there. We're going to focus on the one up here, okay? So this is flat to the side. And then I'm going to take and kind of maybe put my finger there and let this flap go over this way and focus only on that top corner. And then this flap is still going to the side. Put a staple there, okay? And hammer that down good. Then you're going to make these corners hidden. I don't know, what do you call it? Like hospital corners? Is that what you call it?
I've never heard that.
I don't know.
before in my life.
Is there somebody said hospital corners or like some sort of military corners or something? Hospital corners, right?
Or military corners.
Military corners. Yes. See, I knew. Okay. Anyway, so then I'm going to work on the bottom corner right here. So I've got this fold down flat, and then I want this fold to go inside, and then I'm going to have it line up with that corner, and then but the bump is going to go on the bottom that people aren't going to see. So I want it to go nice and lined up like that. And pull it tight, make sure it's not like a weird fold, right? So there's this straight, and then the bump is gonna go on the bottom. Staple there, and then maybe a couple of extras to keep, I'm just gonna pull this tight here. And then put another one up here. And then this stuff in the back, nobody's gonna see that. But if I stand it up, you know, this is flat here, and then your little bump is on the bottom that people aren't gonna see. And that's how you do all four corners. Okay. So we have our beautiful raw canvas stretched, and now we need to coat it with gesso. Not gesso, gesso. Yes. Okay. Which is basically just an acrylic paint, acrylic white paint. It's just cheaper. You buy it in a large bucket or a gallon or whatever. Important is tarp put down on the floor, which is what I got here, plastic sheet, whatever you got. And then I'm gonna put my canvas flat. And when I do this, again, there's a process to it. Usually my gesso is in a bucket, but since we don't have a bucket, I'm gonna put it into a bucket. Okay. And depending on what type of gesso that you buy, there's an artist grade, there's student grade, and this is a little bit runnier than I'm used to. The stuff that I buy is like super thick actually, and it's meant to be watered down. So like if you get like a Utrecht bucket and you look it up and it looks like paste or something like that, there's a reason for that. It's just a higher quality gesso, you water it down a bit. So what I do is I first, especially with a large one, I'll put an X across. Don't mind that first one I did, sorry. So this is the point like where if I tightened it super tight, like a big one, like the one over there that we were working on, this is where I might start to hear the wood cracking. So, and you might even see it bow upward, which I've had happen to me, but it will settle back down again, so don't freak out. So what you're doing with the X is getting it a nice even stretch. So the canvas, when you apply the paint to it, it's gonna tighten up like a drum, basically. So you want it to do that evenly across the surface, which is why I'm putting this X across. And you know, this small one, it's pretty easy to do. With a larger piece, it might take some acrobatics from you. Just call it some good exercise. That's what artists do. So from there, then I'm just gonna go around the edges, which I accidentally started doing over there. And if I have the thicker gesso, I'm gonna be either pouring some gesso into the bucket, or I'm gonna be dipping into the water a lot to get it to smooth out. Particularly for the first coat, because you'll find when you do the first coat on a raw canvas, it is a little bit harder because it soaks into that canvas. As you do each consecutive layer, it'll smooth on a little bit easier because it's already soaked in and stretched. So I'll get these edges, and then I'm gonna know that it's really nice and even all around. And when I gesso, if I want to do something really professional, I would say 3 coats of gesso. For my work, I do even more than that because I add absorbent ground to it, which I can show you a little bit later once I've got these coated. So it's important also when you do gesso that you let it dry between each layer that you do. So don't be too hasty in your process. You have to let it dry. So that's another reason that it's good to do more than one canvas at a time. Because then you can just lay them all out, do one, let it dry, and then move to the next one. And then by the time you've gone through the other ones, you come back and the first one is dry again. And you can do a second coat and then the third coat. When you do gesso straight like this, the other thing that you'll do between layers is to sand it. Otherwise you're gonna get a really kind of toothy texture, which you don't necessarily want. I suppose you might want that, but in order to make it a nice, smooth painting surface, you have kind of some fine grit sandpaper, or you might work from medium grade to finer grade as you proceed. So as I do this, I'm filling in those gaps there and getting across it. So I might kind of work my way towards the center there. And this is mostly for the first coat. The other 2 coats, since it's already stretched, they don't matter as much the way that you do them. So if your piece is large and it does start to like warp or bow up, actually what I've been known to do is like put a little weight on the corner as it dries, and then it'll basically just settle back down and be flat again. So you can hear that already, like right, nice drum to it. But then don't forget the sides. They are important. Don't leave those raw. So I'll do that once I've got this filled in.
What brand would you recommend, if any,
I like
specific?
Utrex.
Utrex?
Yeah. That's what I have at home.
And that's the really thick one that you have to water down?
Yeah.
How much do you water it down?
Oh gosh, I don't know. I just feel it as I go. It's kind of like
Well-
it's like the cook in the kitchen who doesn't have a recipe, right?
Right, okay.
It still feels good, right? Tastes good. Just taste it. You can't really taste this, right? But
I mean, you could, but I don't know if you end up.
you should never taste your art
healthy.
supplies, right? Anyway. So there's the surface. You can see how nice and tight it is. I don't know, you heard the sound earlier. And then do the edges. Sometimes what I do is actually, like, if I have like jars of stuff in my studio that are all the same size, I'll actually set them on top of jars and then lift it up.
Oh, and then go like around the edges.
Yeah, and then I won't have to worry about, you know, the floor. I mean, I still put tarp down, but it's like kind of a pain to like have to try to do this and you like paint on the floor there like that. So that's why I'm lifting it up with my hand. So even with all the coats, I don't just give one coat to the side, I address the side as much as I do the surface. And if I have something big and I'm worried about like fraying in the back, I sometimes, you know, put a little bit of gesso on this edge so that none of the strings like come loose or anything like that. Then I know it's gonna be nice and solid for me. I'm not as worried about something as small as this one, but a larger one, I definitely would do that.
Okay. So if I...
It's not a tragedy, is what I'm telling you.
Okay, so like...
Nothing is ever a tragedy in art making.
Are you sure? Okay.
Because mistakes can always go into the work, right? Okay, then let that sit and dry and we're all good with that. A couple of just other little tips while I'm talking is that the edges, once you've got the 3 coats of gesso on there, before I start painting, I actually put thick masking tape around the edges so that I don't have like weird drips and splashes on there, because later I'm gonna wanna finish it and make it look nice. So it's just easier to tape it off and then later you can paint it and you have a finished surface, which is pretty cool. And then that's it. Yay! Hey, so here I have a canvas stretcher that I built and I stretched as I showed you and put 3 coats of gesso on it. So remember that first coat of gesso, you're stretching the canvas with the X across, and the other 2 coats you can just put however you want. But the important thing is that you actually sand between layers. So this is a fine grit sandpaper that I'm using, and I want to make sure I kind of get any like texture or weird stuff off of the surface. And usually you do this at least between the 2nd and 3rd layer as well as after the final layer. May take a bit more time when you have a larger surface to work with, which I most often do, but it's super important. You know, make sure you touch the surface, feel the difference between before you sand it and after, and you'll see a huge difference, a huge change. So you could decide, hey, I'm ready to paint, and go ahead and get started with your work at this stage. Totally fine. For my own personal work, I tend to not like the canvas texture that remains still in the piece, and I don't really want people to see that in my work. So I do something that I apply to the surface where it adds even more layers and just kind of evens out the surface so that it's almost as smooth as paper. And the stuff that I use is called absorbent ground. I have this here. The stuff that I have to use with the stretched canvas is called golden absorbent ground because it's actually made to be flexible, so it won't crack on a stretched canvas. There's another recipe that I have is for wood panel, which I can show you later, but this is great stuff to use. It is a little bit pricey, but you can water it down 25% with water and 75% ground. So what I have is 1 bucket of pure ground and 1 bucket of stuff that's mixed. So, and then I also have this sort of measuring cup. Okay, so this is the stuff. What it does is you put multiple layers on it and let them dry fully in between layers. And in the end, you're gonna end up with a really nice, smooth, porous surface. And it almost treats it like, I don't know, like a wet plaster, like a
fresco surface like, you know, the artists used to paint with during the Renaissance. You might need a screwdriver to open up your bucket. All right, so I found a hammer and I just kind of pried it open here. And then I have this special kind of measuring container, which is really helpful because I want to get 75% of this and 25% of water. So it takes a little bit of doing of math. I'll do 18 ounces of ground and then up to 24 of water to get my percentage that I need. So I'm going to watch the side and just pour in. Going straight ground up to the line where it says 18 ounces. Stopping there. So I have to admit that the ground isn't terribly cheap stuff, but I love it so much that I buy it. So now I have another container with just water, and I'm gonna pour it up to the 24 ounce line with water. It's a little bit more difficult to see, so look closely. It looks pretty close. And then I'm gonna find a stirring stick and stir it up really well so I can apply it to my surface. So I have my stirring stick, mix it up real well. And when you apply this, it's not gonna be the same as applying acrylic gesso. It's gonna be a little bit more fluid. So you can see on my canvas over here that I've actually, I've got plastic on the floor and I've lifted it up evenly on all the sides because when you put a whole bunch of coats of this stuff, it will drip a bit. And I don't really want it sticking to the plastic or to the floor or anything. So keep on stirring until it feels kind of smooth and creamy. And then you can go over to your surface. Okay, so I have a nice kind of soft brush and I've got this nicely mixed up and I can start to put one coat on the surface. This stuff does take quite a bit of time to dry in between layers, but you have to make sure that you're patient and do let it fully dry. You know, maybe you could, you know, try and do it outside where it's a little bit of a breeze, or just, you know, go do something else in between layers. So as you apply it, you know, what it's gonna do is to kind of settle into the texture of the canvas. And the more layers that you apply, the more you'll see that start to disappear. So it should be a bit runny, okay? And you want to make it as nice and smooth as possible. And don't fiddle with it too much so it just kind of settles and dries. So when I do this for myself, I put ideally 4 layers of ground on top of 3 layers of gesso. I suppose you could try with 3. The more layers you put, the more absorbency you have in your surface. So what you can do is you can get these really nice kind of washes. You can pool up and make it look like watercolor, or you can even, you know, start with a gouache if you want. And what it does is it just sucks the paint right into that surface and gives it a really delicate, beautiful look. I have a few paintings around here I can show you kind of close up some of the effects that it gives once I finish this. So you see that drippiness that's happening there. So obviously you don't want it to dry that way. So take a brush and go along those edges and make them even. have it. You'll let it sit and dry, and remember, come back when it's fully dry. You know, make sure you look carefully at the surface. There should be no shininess to it. It should look dull and totally dry. If you are too impatient and you try to give it a coat before it's fully dry, it's gonna end up kind of catching on you and getting all gross, and the surface will no longer be smooth and it won't be very much fun to paint on. So, like I said, patience is key here. You wanna have a nice, beautiful surface to work on. So once I've got, you know, my additional coats of ground, then I'll do some sanding again in between layers, and then I'm pretty well ready to paint. So there, we've fully built our own stretcher, stretched it with canvas, and prepared the surface. Okay, so I have this painting in my studio that I did a number of years ago, but if I zoom way in on it, and you look closely, like at this area, you can see kind of those spots where I could leave it a little bit washy and reticulation marks. There's a bit of a porous surface. You don't see any texture from the canvas, but you do sometimes see like little tiny dots, which are, if I can get it to focus, really similar to almost like your skin. And it'll just beautifully suck the paint into the surface in a really nice way. It is kind of a dull surface if you don't like that, but you can, I see that shine there, you can add a medium to it to make other certain parts shiny if that's what you want. Okay, so this surface is drying. I'll do additional layers. I'll put my mixed kind of ground that I added water to already into my jug with the other mixed media, so I can, you know, use it later maybe on another surface. So that's pretty cool. This is one of my favorite surfaces to work on. Don't forget to sand in between layers and, you know, maybe try it out. Hey, it'd be super cool if you like and subscribe, and I will catch you next time for my next exciting art demo.